Well, the moment you've all been waiting for. I consider the omnipresent, if not omniscient, person of educator excellence, a person who has helped the department reach for a new higher level of achievement and serving you, the teachers and educators at California. The person we all know helps be our Northern Star, Linda Darling-Hammond.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. I apologize for being late. There are Senate hearings going on right now on the teacher shortage, and I was over there with them thinking about what we're going to do about it. So you are the reasons that we're worrying about this, and I am delighted to be with this very important group of fellow profession builders from all across the state. And I want to thank Tom Torlakson and all of the good folks in the CDE who are lined up here in the front row for continuing to blow on the embers of the teacher quality agenda, the Greatness by Design work that we started a few years ago. I'm so pleased that we're still having this conversation and making progress each year on various parts of that agenda. Of course, one of the things that we wanted to put forward in that report was how to have a continuum and aligned education development process over the course of a teaching career. And of course, the notion of alignment assumes we have a clear idea of what we are aiming for and what we are aligning around. And as you well know, in recent years, we have replaced our old standards with new California standards in ELA and math and science. These are intended to be fewer, higher, and deeper. And so this question of what kind of learning constitutes deeper learning is one that I wanted to start with. And I love thinking about these questions kind of metaphorically. And one of the ways that I remind myself that, in fact, students can achieve deeper learning, they can understand things and apply them in sophisticated ways to solve problems, is by collecting evidence from other English teachers around the country. And this little bit of evidence comes from students' responses to instruction around learning the meaning of metaphor. Now, you can understand the concept of metaphor shallowly, as some of these examples suggest. For example, starting off the process, he is as tall as a 6'3" tree. So there's a metaphor there, there's an as, but it is not a deep understanding. Now, here's a little deeper. John and Mary had never met. They were like two hummingbirds who also had never met. Now that's progress, but with more instruction, we can get more to the deep understanding of this idea of metaphor. Here's another one that gets a little closer. The ballerina rose gracefully en pointe and extended one slender leg behind her, just like a dog at a fire hydrant. That's what you call connecting instruction to the real world. Linked learning. Here's one that comes from a young person in New York, and you can see that deeper learning is indeed possible. He fell for her like his heart was a mob informant, and she was the East River. And finally, proof that deeper learning can occur. She grew on him like she was a colony of E. coli, and he was room temperature Canadian beef. And let me tell you, I took out the grossest ones, so you didn't have to live through that. So it is true that the nature of learning is changing. Our expectations for this kind of deeper learning are coming to the fore. And we are accepting the idea that teaching is not just about covering the curriculum or getting through the book. It's actually about enabling learning from a wide range of diverse learners who come with different experiences and knowledge bases and strengths to build on. And in many respects in California right now, it is the best of times and it is the worst of times. We are emerging from the dark ages of California budget cuts and also the dark ages of a test and punish era of No Child Left Behind. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the future. We have, of course, a new funding system that really allocates funds based on student needs. It gets communities involved along with educators in thinking about what our priorities should be and how should we allocate those funds. We have, as I said, new standards, new assessments that are being used for information and improvement, not for sanctions and punishments. We need to keep it that way over time. We have a multiple measures system that is looking at a variety of things that matter when you want to understand schools. Not only what are student outcomes on things like tests and English language proficiency measures, but also things like what proportion of kids are getting a college-ready curriculum and completing it, what proportion of kids are getting a career technical sequence that meets a set of standards and completing that, things that really matter for life success. What proportion of kids are graduating? What kind of opportunities to learn do they have? Are they getting a full, rich curriculum? All of these kinds of things are going, over time, are going to help schools think about the things that matter most. And it's very important for members of the profession to be very involved in that local LCAP process of thinking about what are we going to value in our community? What are we going to hold ourselves accountable for? What are we going to measure our progress toward that really matters for the learning of children and for the kind of teaching that we want to undertake? We have some wonderful work going on around the state in terms of helping us implement the new standards from all kinds of places, from the subject matter projects, from the Instructional Leadership Corps that CTA has created with the National Board Resource Center, where teachers are learning to engage their colleagues in professional development, and then building more teacher leadership in the schools as we engage in cycles of inquiry about let's try developing a shift in the standards. Let's try it out. Let's come back together. Let's talk about what's working, what's not working. Let's plan curriculum together. To the extent that we can deepen that work, we can begin to build the kind of collegial shaping of educational progress that characterizes high-achieving countries around the world and our best schools and districts here in California. In some ways, we are leading the nation with this new image of accountability, this new image of how to implement standards well. Some of you may have seen the EdSource article recently about California's progress on the Common Core standards in contrast to New York's, where they put a basket of different kinds of ever-changing tests before they put the standards themselves, and are actually retrenching now because of the number of teachers and principals and superintendents and parents who rejected a very hard-edged punitive approach to trying to implement the standards. We did not follow the federal guidance under Race to the Top and the waiver programs that dictated more intense approaches to shame and blame and more test-based decision-making for teacher evaluation and other things. And now the feds are following us because the new Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is called ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was passed in December, calls for multiple measures to evaluate schools. It gives states the opportunity to figure out how they will evaluate school progress and student progress. It gives states the opportunity to develop continuous improvement systems rather than punitive accountability systems. It invests or allows for and encourages investments in high-quality professional learning, in teacher residency models, in a variety of things that we know are likely to help teachers learn. It provides a lot of these possibilities. But there are also perils in front of us. And one of the most critical of those are the teacher shortages that we were just talking about over in the Capitol. Over the last decade, we've had a 76% decline in the number of individuals coming into teaching through our higher education institutions. That was not a big problem when we were also cutting teachers and having layoffs and not hiring, but now we are hiring. There's a big increase in demand over the last few years. Districts are trying to return to more reasonable pupil-teacher ratios. We have the highest pupil-teacher ratios in the country by far, and there is progress being made at getting to more reasonable pupil loads and class sizes, but that means that there's a demand for teachers who now are not there. And one of our questions is, how are we going to build a teaching profession, rebuild a teaching profession that is attractive, that people want to come into and stay in? And while there is some increase in the number of young people coming into teaching, they're not necessarily going to our high shortage fields: special education, bilingual ESL education, math and science. And so all of these things could threaten our progress if we don't put in place a very aggressive set of policies to help people come into teaching without debt, to come into the profession on which all other professions depend in a way that honors and values them. A lot of people ask me, well, what should we do about our teacher shortages like right now? My answer is keep the teachers you have, because in fact attrition is one of the biggest reasons that we're in this pickle. In high achieving countries like Singapore and Finland and others, only about 2% of teachers leave the teaching force each year. In the United States, it's about 8%. If we even reduced attrition to about 3% of the teaching force, we would cut the demand in half, and we would have enough teachers already to fill all of our positions. So part of what we have to do is value the teachers we have, and ensure that beginning teachers are getting the mentoring and the coaching that they need, ensure that teachers are getting the solid preparation that they need, because prepared teachers leave at half the rate of unprepared teachers because they feel more confident, that we make teaching more affordable, that we continue to get salaries equalized and competitive with those in other professions, that we support the development of school principals. The single biggest reason teachers will stay in a school is the quality of the principal or leave. And it has to do with whether there's a collegial environment, whether there are supports for teaching, whether there is the time available for teachers to work with each other and reach out to students and parents. So this is part of our challenge, but I think we are definitely up for it. One of the critical things for all of us to do, if you are in higher education, if you are in K-12 education, is to organize and advocate for supporting the learning and the preparation of all of the people who are coming into the profession. Because without that, we won't be able to meet this challenge around the new standards, nor will we be able to ensure that we have what a profession requires. Profession requires that everybody has a common knowledge base that they can work with on behalf of the kids. And as we know, everyone struggles when not every member of the profession has acquired that knowledge base. It spills over in all kinds of ways. And in every occupation that has become a profession during the 20th century, and that started with medicine in 1910, then law became a profession after that. Engineering became a profession after that, accounting, many other fields. The single most important thing was saying we have a common knowledge base that we're going to ensure that everyone has mastered, so that the public will trust us to manage ourselves, to be the technical decision makers. And that's going to be a big part of our challenge going forward. So we want to get good teachers into the profession, and the Greatness by Design, and keep good teachers in the profession. And the Greatness by Design report talked about what we could do in terms of recruitment and preparation and induction and mentoring, professional learning that is more than the drive-by, spray and pray, one-shot workshops that many of us have experienced. One person said to me once, I hope that when I pass over to the other side, I'm in one of those workshops because I will already be closer to death and it will be an easier transition. So, we talked about how to create the kind of professional learning settings where teachers can intensely engage around curriculum that they're teaching and the students that they teach. Learn new strategies, curriculum strategies, share those with each other, and then work together to improve their practice in and out of each other's classrooms and so on. So we want that, and we want career ladders that are emphasizing how we share expertise. There have been different versions of views about how to improve the teaching profession. One view kind of thinks that teachers are motivated primarily by money and other extrinsic carrots and sticks. And you need to kind of flog people if they don't meet a standard, to try to offer bonuses or merit pay based on how students' test scores turn out, and basically incentivize greater motivation because the view is that teachers are withholding what they know and could do unless there were a carrot to say, you'll get a bonus if you put out more of what you already know. Another philosophy says that people are motivated by being effective with their colleagues and learning, and that what we really need to do is enable people to have those opportunities for learning, and in that, and sharing that with others. As they become more effective, we all know this as teachers, when you succeed with a student or with a group of them, that's the greatest reward. And by the way, you don't necessarily want a merit pay system that says if I win, you, my colleague, loses. And we are actually competing with each other rather than collaborating to get this very complicated job done, because teaching is ultimately a team sport and not an individual undertaking. So in that view, career ladders which recognize teachers for their excellence and their accomplishment should be designed so that we're always sharing expertise. The whole point of recognition should be to allow us to stimulate more learning. And people can be recognized for many different things, for many different skills and accomplishments, and then utilized in districts and in their schools to share with others in many different ways. So that is, in fact, the North Star of greatness by design. And it really takes up this idea that it's not just about individual teachers being good, but creating a teaching context in which everyone can become accomplished together, that really is the goal. And it suggests that we need a teaching and learning system. Good teaching can't be dissociated from curriculum and assessment. Everything has to point together towards meaningful learning. And we have to build what Michael Fullan calls the professional capital that we collectively share and that allows us to move a whole school forward or a whole district forward or a whole network of other professionals forward. When I travel, I see this kind of teaching and learning system in a lot of countries, and I think we ought to try to envision what that might look like in California. If you were in some of the places I've mentioned, Singapore or Finland or some of the states in Australia and so on, the curriculum, like our new California standards, is a shared curriculum. Teachers are working together in pre-service and in-service settings to learn to implement and that curriculum. They're designing units and lessons together. There are no pacing guides because students are at the center, and what they know and can do guides what teachers do in working with the curriculum. Teachers are, in fact, designing lessons together, typically in the 10 or 15 hours a week that they have when they're not teaching. Part of what we need to accomplish in this kind of a system is a set of school settings where teachers in the United States, in California, have that kind of time. Our teachers teach more hours per year than teachers in any other country in the world. We're tied with Chile in that. 27 hours a week. Often there are hall duties and recess duties and other things on top of that, and so teachers end up with 3 to 5 hours a week for individual planning and a very short lunch period if they get one of those. The average across the world is 19 hours a week of time that is spent with students. In Shanghai or Norway, it's 15 hours a week. Spent with students. The rest of the time is in and out of other teachers' classrooms, observing, giving feedback, designing curriculum together, designing assessments together, working with individual students who need extra help, reaching out to that parent who you know you need to get a hold of to get a student back on track. And we have the factory model still in place in a lot of places, and we need to begin to tackle how we'll get a curriculum and assessment teaching and learning system which builds instruction by redesigning schools. And I'm going to come back to that theme. The other thing that is going on in these countries is that teachers are part of often designing the assessments and scoring them. And we had an exercise in California and 3 other states this last year where teachers came together and scored the performance tasks for Smarter Balanced. And the feedback from that was extraordinary. Well over 95% of teachers in California and the other states said scoring those performance tests together, thinking about what the standards should be, informed their instruction, helped them understand the standards more deeply, increased their capacity to develop curriculum, and ought to be part of what we do regularly. And California intends to have a contract on its ongoing assessments, which requires that teachers will score those open-ended items. And that's going to be part of a process of linking curriculum and assessment together. Because tests should not be something that are done unto kids or teachers. They should be things that guide and inform and are shaped by teachers as we build this system. The other thing we need to realize is that teaching quality is different than teacher quality. Teacher quality is the knowledge, skills, and dispositions we try to help teachers acquire, both in the profession and as they're on their way in. But we've had a lot in recent conversations of attention to let's get the right teachers and let's fire the ones that are not the right teachers. And it's all about the individual teacher. Yet we have a lot of evidence from studies that the effectiveness of individual teachers is greater, and their shared effectiveness in promoting student learning when they are in teams of teachers who work together over time in a collaborative setting. That an individual teacher will be more effective in a setting where they have that opportunity than building the little island oasis in their own classroom, which I remember doing in my time as a teacher in big urban high schools. You know, that was the best I could manage, was trying to build my little oasis. But we know that the collaboration matters, and it actually matters more than the individual teacher effectiveness, that a teacher who has that wraparound can become significantly better as she plans with colleagues and so on, and that an excellent teacher may not be able to offer high quality instruction if the context doesn't allow it. Think of a doctor, 2 doctors. I'm going to use Stanford Hospital as my benchmark here just because it's right up the street from where I live. And one of those Stanford doctors, best training in the world, goes off to a developing country with Doctors Without Borders and works in a little clinic where there are no tools, very few medicines, and no technology. And the other doctor goes and takes a job maybe at Stanford Hospital where there is oogobs of tools and technology and so on. Both of them are cardiac surgeons. The outcomes for one doctor are going to be extraordinarily different than those for the other doctor, even though they know and can do the same things, because the tools available to them are going to be so radically different. And we have to recognize that that's also true for teachers, that it matters for teachers' effectiveness what the curriculum and assessment system is that they sit in, what the fit is between the demands that they're asked to fulfill, the job assignment that they have, and their qualifications. We know that teachers are more effective if they're able to teach the same grade level or subject area for multiple years, particularly as beginning teachers. And yet in a lot of schools, you're asked to teach second grade one year and fifth grade the next, and kindergarten the year after that. We know that continuity matters for student learning and for teacher learning, and that peers matter. And so an excellent teacher asked to teach a flawed curriculum without appropriate materials and assessments or out of field will be able to do much less than an excellent teacher with all of the tools and context that they need. And so we need to begin to focus on teaching quality as well as teacher quality. And understand that it is the job of our system as a whole, our administrators and our teachers, to figure out how to create the context within which teachers can be successful. Teachers, we know, are more likely to stay in schools where they feel they can succeed. And if teachers stay in schools where they can succeed, we will also solve the teacher shortage problem, as well as building the context within which kids can also succeed. So I want to end this frame for you with a challenge to those of you who are in teacher education, higher education, those who are administrators, those who are teachers, about the need to support educator quality and learning by redesigning our schools, as well as by offering strong professional development and fabulous pre-service teacher education. In many contexts, teacher educators find themselves having to struggle to find placements for student teachers where they can actually experience high-quality education being offered to diverse students in an equitable way with certainty. The practice has been to go out and say, can you take a student teacher? Oh, so-and-so didn't get one last year, maybe they would like one this year, et cetera. You know, you've seen it probably. But there are places that are building new models where universities are reaching out to schools and saying, we don't want your classrooms, we want your expertise. Build a setting with us where the best possible curriculum is being offered in a way where we, as we've seen in some of the schools we've worked with in my own university, where we get past the old traditions of tracking some students into one curriculum and others into another, where we train teachers to be able to teach the English language learners in their classroom to be prepared because expert teachers are guiding them to teach students with a range of special needs, where the school as a whole enacts restorative justice and equitable strategies, and where those become the teaching hospitals that medicine created in 1910 and that we need for education to move forward. And then in other schools, we need educators to step up, as they did in New York City some years ago when I was there, and redesign schools. Teachers redesign schools. The Chancellor of New York City said, if you've got a good idea for designing schools, let me know what it is. We'll take proposals. We'll fund the ones that make the most sense. Several hundred schools in that district were redesigned over the course of that decade, and several hundred more have been redesigned since. And what did educators do? Principals, teachers, sometimes community members and parents together. They created schedules where teachers had 10 or 12 hours a week to work together, sometimes in grade level teams, talking about the kids and what they needed, and sometimes in departmental teams, talking about the content and the curriculum and how to build it across the grade levels and throughout the school. They built that time in, they built relationships in where teams of teachers work with the same kids, sometimes over multiple years, so that they had a group of colleagues together. They thought about how to create more continuity for children with relationships. They built the schedules and the funding into parent visits, home visits, and parent-teacher conferences that strengthen the nature of the school. They embedded high-quality professional learning in the schools, job embedded, as well as connected to other networks of things like the Writing Project and mathematics networks and so on, where all teachers could get that access on a regular basis. When educators design schools, they don't look like factories. They look like learning communities. They look like places that nurture children as well as adults. And if we're going to achieve the goals of greatness by design, we need to do everything we can do with respect to individual teachers and their access to knowledge. And then we have to do even more with respect to the collective opportunities of teachers to build a strong profession in organizations designed to support their success. And educators have done that in California. Many of you have been involved in efforts like these, and they've done it around the country. And that's what it's going to take to switch us from shortages to surpluses. In some of the schools that I just talked about, where they used to have all kinds of trouble getting teachers to apply, where 2/3 of the kids were dropping out of big warehouse factory high schools, and now 90% are graduating, same kids, same community, and 500 teachers are applying for every job because people want to work in settings where they can love the children effectively and be successful. That's what it's going to take for California as well to achieve the goals that we've set out. So let me close with the notion that Horace Mann suggested some years ago. He said, where anything is growing, one former is worth 1,000 reformers. We are the formers in this room today, and I wish you all Godspeed in the forming work that you're doing. Thank you.